Hello. Hi, nice to be here at the Embodied Meditation Conference. Nice to speak about some of these themes, and the theme that I've chosen, which I've called "Sitting in the Fire." The fire of life is an image that the Buddha used very much to describe just the way the stuff of life can assault our senses, the ways we can feel ourselves to be burning up with the stuff of life, and then the various liberating practices where we can actually cultivate and then increasingly know and taste and really inhabit a certain kind of genuine ease and spaciousness, regardless of circumstance. And that can seem sort of mind-boggling, maybe unbelievable at first, when we're really pulled around by the stuff of life, when we really find our emotional life and our reactivity and our fear and our anxiety and our blame and our anger, all stimulated by what? The stuff that we find uncomfortable and unpleasant. Right? And yet, and this is certainly what the last 35 years of my own life and practice has been about, right? Has been about letting, following teachings and practice guidance into that territory. The willingness to sit in the fire, to lean in to the uncomfortable and the inconvenient and the unpleasant, to find out what is it that I'm doing that makes experience even more uncomfortable and unpleasant. What is the resistance or the blame, the fear that I'm adding on? And what happens when I don't do that anymore? So today's session really is partly about that. What happens when we can stay cool in the midst of a fire? And mostly it's about what can we do so as to know that. And these three things I want to focus on. Three primary orientations. Three primary embodied practices that really open that territory of coolness, of ease, of spaciousness, of genuine freeness of being. Open them up in the midst of the stuff of life. And those three I'm going to call embodied presence, embodied spaciousness or openness, and then embodied knowing or embodied wisdom. And I'll speak about them for the next half hour or so. I'll open them up in ways that keep pointing us to not just thinking about those things, but coming into an embodied relationship, a felt relationship, an immediate relationship with them. And then let's see, we'll have a little time at the end as well to where I can respond to the kinds of questions that might come up around that. So, embodied presence. What is that? I mean, just to consider for yourself. What do you think I mean? What do you mean? Embodied presence. The word embodiment is, in this world, it's used very, very, very much, right? And yet, it occurs to me that those of you listening to this, you might have very different sense of what embodiment even means. Right? So to me, the real ground, the essence of embodiment, the heart of embodiment, and actually, I would say, and maybe others on this conference might disagree, but the fulfillment of embodiment in many ways is embodied presence. That means the capacity to actually be alive within our embodied experience as it's happening. And that kind of might sound ordinary, right? But that's not an on-off switch. It's not that we're either just disassociated, disembodied, lost in thought, or we're ding, embodied, present, awake in our experience. It's a trajectory, and I would say it's an infinite trajectory. We might talk about being fully embodied. Sounds good, right? Oh, fully embodied. But I'm not sure there is such a thing as fully embodied. There's just an infinite deepening into the sense of being here in this sensory moment, this felt moment, this alive moment. An deepening sense of the feel of being here, and then the understanding of being here, and the dimensionality of being here. So I think that's helpful to consider, not an on or off switch, but an infinitely deepening trajectory. And meditation practice, there's many ways of just getting into some embodied presence. Dance, for example, any sport of various kinds, any sort of trance-like activity. There's many ways that can sort of take you out of your busy, slightly tormented, fractured, abstract thinking into just feeling more of what's happening. But a lot of the ways we do that are through having some intensity. So sport or dance, for example, right? You're dancing a lot. There's a combination of the music and the endorphins and the physical exertion that the intensity brings your attention into your body. Wonderful. What's different in meditation is that you're learning how to be embodied, present, sensitive, awake, attuned, without the intensity. Intensity draws awareness, right? So dance and you feel in your body. Great. But that doesn't necessarily help you to stay present in your body when the music stops, right? When the dance ends. Because when the intensity dissolves, then we tend to go back to the former abstract patterns. So meditation is actually the training of more and more inhabiting your experience. That might be through just following your breath, for example, just feeling the expansiveness of the in-breath and the relaxation of the out-breath. And then ding, the way you space out, and then, oh yeah, let's come back. So you're coming back, and you're coming back, and you're sort of entering in, and you're softening, and you're settling. Sometimes I describe the process of meditation like that as sensing, settling, softening. And for those of you who take the longer training on this, where I'll lead some of the sessions, then I'll refer to that in various ways. Sensing, actually feeling what's happening, settling, cultivating the art of an attention that actually can sort of slow down and stay. Not because we're forcing it to stay, there's no struggle, but settling through a process of relaxation, conscious relaxation. Sensing, settling, and softening. One of the biggest factors in real embodied presence is relaxing. 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 Sounds good, but most of us don't really know how to relax. Certainly not how to relax consciously. Most of us relax by spacing out in some way. Yeah, relax by having a few drinks. Relax by taking a nap. Relax in front of the TV. Oh, nice, all of those maybe. But they're all ways of actually giving away our consciousness in some way. Meditative relaxation is relaxing into being more conscious, more attuned, more awake. And so that underpins, well, unfortunately it doesn't underpin all approaches to meditation, but it should, I would say, underpin all approaches. And it definitely will underpin all approaches to meditation that we use in the embodied meditation training. And, we can people get a little impatient or frustrated. We say, oh, it sounds good, I want to be embodied and present. But when I sit down to meditate, attention keeps flying away in various ways. Sometimes people draw the conclusion from that, oh, meditation's not for me. My mind won't settle. But if anything, I would say that's the evidence that meditation might well be for you. Right? If your mind did settle very easily, well, we wouldn't need. That's why it's called a practice. And the practice of recognizing that we all, you and me and everyone, have minds that tend towards abstraction. The nature of mind is to move. It's as normal for mind to produce thoughts as it is for ears to hear or eyes to see, right? Mind thinks. That's what it does. And so it's not that that's a problem, it's that we're learning, okay, how to be skillful with the fact that I've got this brilliant mind, busy mind, right? A thought-producing mind. How to be skillful with that so that rather than just being pulled away by my thoughts, I'm able to be present, awake, relaxed, here, in such a way that I can then be discerning about thoughts. Right? Have a completely different relationship to the thoughts. That's the second thing I wanted to speak about. Embodied spaciousness or openness. We tend, and you can see for yourself in whatever experience you have in meditation, we tend to, it's like, oh, here's all these busy mind, or here are these uncomfortable emotions, or here's this restlessness, or whatever. And we hear something about, oh, getting space from what's happening, and we try to withdraw. I think, oh no, I'll get some space by getting away from. That seems like it would make sense, but when you try to get away from experience, you don't end up with being spacious. You end up with being in conflict, right? I'm pushing against. Oh, I don't like that. I don't want that. I want to get away from that. Or say it more spiritually, I'm trying to get some space from that. Rather counterintuitively, you actually find space. You actually find a spacious relationship with what's happening, not by trying to get away from it, but by going into it. So what's an example of that? Let's take some emotion, anger, for example. Right? Mostly when we get angry, we just want to dump that anger on somebody. Right? It's your fault. How could you speak to me like that, etc. Or we blame ourselves. Oh, I'm so angry. I shouldn't be so angry. Or, what's the matter with me? And then we hear about spaciousness, and there's some sense of, oh, I need to get space from or space around my anger. It doesn't really, it certainly never occurred to me at least, and I think generally it doesn't occur to us, no, come close to the anger. That doesn't mean getting closer to the story about why I'm angry, who I'm angry with, what they did or said, how it should have been different, who's right and wrong, etc. Right? That isn't anger. That's the story that's driving the anger along. That's the drama and the detail. So what's anger? If it's not just the story of who you're angry with and why. What's anger? Well, if we look to the embodied experience, it's hot. Right? Anger is hot. It tends to be bubbly. It's like a volcano. Anger feels hot and red often. It sort of tends to start in the belly, either as heat in the belly or as tightness in the belly, and it feels like it moves up, sort of like an eruption. Right? It doesn't maybe occur to us that the way to be spacious with that is actually to come close to it. Feel the heat. Feel the bubbling. And what we notice, and if we really notice this, it's a radical shift in our understanding. What we notice is the very fact that we can be in contact with the anger is amazing. How come? Right? If I'm angry, then what is it that's just observing, that's in contact with, that's feeling? What is it that's feeling the anger? Because that which is aware of anger, that which is feeling anger, that which is in relationship to the anger, isn't itself angry. That, let's call it awareness, right? That which is in touch with, that which is tracking, that which is feeling the anger, is itself, by its nature, spacious. It is the space in which the anger can be felt. So we can't figure that bit out. I'm trying to speak about it, but it's really a process of keep coming close to your experience, particularly your uncomfortable experience. It's not comfortable to be angry. It's hot and agitating. It's not comfortable to be sad. It's not comfortable to be confused. But that which relates to sadness isn't itself sad. It's the spaciousness around sadness. That which knows confusion isn't itself confused. Wow. That is the spaciousness that's liberating. It's not the taking space from, getting space around. It's going into with a quality of genuine presence, curiosity, right? The willingness to feel into, the willingness to find out about what's happening. And then you get to taste, there's a spaciousness that can hold, well, maybe that can hold anything. Certainly that can hold emotional discomfort. At first it can feel overwhelming, emotional discomfort. That anger can feel like if I actually go into that, I'll explode with the heat and the bubbles. Or sadness can feel if I actually go into that, I'll drown in the rawness and the pain. On the way in, it's kind of like just a layer, like a layer of turbulence. As you go into something uncomfortable, there's a defense mechanism that says, either get me out of here, or that just wants to invest in the story, the why I'm sad or the why I'm angry. And so, but you learn to just hang in there, stay through that bumpy layer, and to discover, I can actually, what a relief. To make room for anger, to make space for anger, rather than just being angry or judging the anger or trying to get rid of it. So that's the second feature, right? Knowing a quality of openness to experience or spaciousness with experience that is found in the midst of embodied presence. And then the third feature, which, what did I call that? Embodied knowing or embodied wisdom. Let's see how well I'm able to speak about that, because it's a little more subtle, right? So what I called embodied presence, first of all, right, that just sense of being inside of, being attuned to, being awake to what's happening. Embodied knowing or wisdom is the ways in which our experience and our understanding comes alive in the process of inhabiting our experience. So let me try to give an example. Well, for example, our experience is all fluid. Nothing lasts very long. When we're busy, if we take the same example of anger, when we're busy with anger, it can feel very fixed, stuck. I'm angry with you. It's like, it feels like a very solid kind of situation. My anger feels solid. I know in theory it's not going to last forever, but I relate to it in that moment as if it's going to last forever, or as if it's going to last until I manage to do something about it. But when we actually know our experience from the inside, embodied wisdom, embodied knowing just sees and feels and knows everything's brief, right? Which I'm calling anger, as if it's a solid thing. I'm angry with you. Turns out to be a kind of, a dynamic. Turns out to be, like a fire. Right? If anger's hot and red, it burns like a fire. Right? And even with the label "a fire," as if a fire is a thing. But if you really get close, hang out with a fire, and it becomes very obvious that a fire isn't a thing, right? It's just, it's a dynamic, it's a movement, it's combustion, it's transformation, right? There's something elemental about it. Well, maybe that's the same with anger. When we actually come close, when we get inside, when we allow ourselves to feel the movement, right? When we just leave aside, it won't disappear, but leave aside the story of why and who with and all that stuff. Just, you start to notice not only that the anger is moving and changing. But we might start to notice, oh, that's the nature of everything. Nothing lasts. Everything's fluid. Again, I can say that and you can agree or disagree. Probably it sounds reasonable. But that's a very, very, very poor second to the embodied knowing. When I tell you, it becomes an intellectual knowing. Oh, everything's changing. Right? The embodied knowing, embodied knowing transforms the way we relate to experience. And not just the experience we're having, but all experience. To the extent that I know in my bones, in my cells, that everything's brief. Everything's fluid. Everything's changing. Nothing is actually worth me kind of contracting around. To the extent that that knowing is alive in me, is an embodied knowing, to that extent, it opens up the way I meet this moment and every moment. The way I meet this person and every person. The way I meet this emotion and every emotion. And in that sense, what we're calling embodied wisdom has that same quality of being an infinite trajectory. The way our understanding lights up from the inside. And it might be about the changing nature of experience, or it might be the more personal knowing, like where we get to know my own habits. Often we think we know our habits. We tell each other, oh, I'm like this, and because my parents were like this, and I developed this habit, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And you're probably partially right, and you're probably partially a bit distorted in your understanding as well. But when your understanding lights up because you're tracking your experience in real time, it's like, oh. Embodied knowing isn't a question of thinking of something that may or may not be true, thinking of something that I can agree with or not agree with. What I'm calling embodied knowing, wisdom, is like when something is suddenly, unshakably and indisputably clear to us. As clear, this is a Buddha's line, as clear as colour is clear to a person with good eyesight. As clear as it is clear to us that my hand is on the end of my arm. It's not something I have to kind of keep checking. Am I really sure about that? It's just clear. So this process of inhabiting our experience, right? Being spacious with our experience, knowing our experience, we get to taste, sometimes by glimpses, but increasingly that sort of becomes where we're living from, to taste an embodied clarity, an unshakable clarity. And knowing about life that we can be really, really deeply certain of, even if we can't really explain it to others. There's who's that famous line? I was just reading a line by somebody, I can't remember who, and they were saying something about, I know something, but as soon as you ask me about it, I don't know. I'm butchering the line, I can't remember, but it's pointing to that fact that of knowing that's clear enough and deep enough and alive enough and immediate enough and embodied enough that one sort of can be at rest in it. That's a kind of clarity or certainty that most people just don't know. Most people's clarity or certainty is just based on ideas they agree with, or things that they get very busy trying to defend or reinforce. Real certainty, real clarity feels relaxed, it feels open. And the fact that I simultaneously know it deeply and don't know it, as in can't really explain it, can't say it in a way that you'll get it because it has to be an embodied knowing, it's like it doesn't bother us anymore. I'd like to be able to explain. I'll try to explain. I mean, that's what I'm doing now, here, right? I'm trying to express the inexpressible. But you know that desperation that you feel in people sometimes when they're busy trying to tell you something? It's like the busier they are trying to convince you of something, the clearer it is that they don't really know it themselves. So if you take the training, we'll look at all of these three dimensions. And if you don't take the training, I'm hoping that just pointing to these areas here, now, today, can give you some orientation in the way that you meditate, and maybe some inspiration, right, to let your practice go in that direction. Our minds easily go up and out, right? And the encouragement of meditation is to come in and down, right? To inhabit experience, embodied presence, to make room for what's happening, embodied spaciousness, and to taste a kind of deep, clear, true sense of the way experience is, the way reality is, embodied wisdom. So that's a sort of brief tour of these three elements, and I wonder if there's things that you might like me to embellish or add to or clarify, maybe.
Yeah, so I've kind of during the course of this session collected some questions that I've heard come up before. I can ask, but just before we move on to that, and people may in the chat start writing more things that we can perhaps address. But is there any ways that people can first up, like follow up what you're doing? As you mentioned, you'll be on the meditation teacher training, some recorded sessions, and maybe a live session or two there as well. There's your book, Mulunda Shah, Sangha Live, anywhere where people can follow up what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, any and all of those, please feel free to read my book called Awake Where You Are, The Art of Embodied Awareness. I think you can find me on Instagram at Martin Aylward, and my website is martinaylward.com, and there's a lot of things there. There's lots of recorded teachings and practice sessions and various, propaganda for my different activities. And there's a lot of stuff on the web, so you can also just search for my name and find the different places I teach, as well as the training here at Embodiment Unlimited. The main online easy access to me is through Sangha Live, and I offer regular teachings there, and there's a whole kind of worldwide group of people that show up and practice there, and I have a strong community feel to that, so it's a good thing to connect to.
Great, and also there's your other guest teacher on there, and you have SoundCloud and a few things like that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, just Google Martin Aylward, there'll be plenty that comes up. All right, so I'm going into a few different things you mentioned here. I've got a nice loud car going past. I don't know if you hear that. First up, you mentioned about going into the uncomfortable. And obviously, if you're going into something, that closeness, to find the spaciousness or openness to that, is there a point that people might know when that becomes too uncomfortable, when it becomes too overwhelming, how to track that and what to do, how to approach it gently?
Yeah. So two things, I think. Firstly, and I didn't speak about it so much then, but the first part, the embodied presence, it's like connecting with pleasure. Really, really helpful. Like, people often take on a meditation practice with great hopes for it, but they also take it on as a sort of a chore. Oh God, I've got to do my meditation. And then they associate it with either it's boring or it's difficult because of the agitation. So the first thing is connecting with, it's like you're just stopping. I encourage people to undertake a meditation practice sometimes like you're sinking into a bath. You sit on your cushion as if you're taking a rest, as if it's a gift you're offering yourself. And so that just the experience of sitting quietly and breathing, for example, you can connect to it as being, as having qualities of relief, of pleasure, of ease, of quietude. Even if your mind's busy and you're restless or dull or whatever, It's like just invoking that quality of ease and pleasure and non-doing. You build an association and a relationship with quietude and ease, which is an incredibly potent resource, right? So that becomes your ground, the ground of certain capacity to be here gently and peacefully. Then that's the ground from which to then be able to lean into the uncomfortable, right? Because it's not just me being with my uncomfortable experience. It's having a ground of embodied presence, a ground of ease. And then, so that's the first thing. And then from that ground of ease, how long to stay with something uncomfortable, or when is it too much, whether that's something emotionally uncomfortable or just physically uncomfortable. If you're sitting with your legs crossed or something, after a while it becomes uncomfortable. How long to stay with it is you stay with it all the while you're able to cultivate something useful. So all the while you can cultivate spaciousness. All the while you can cultivate a sense of staying in contact and curious and non-reactive. Wonderful. Keep staying. Keep staying. And that may be for a longer or shorter time. It doesn't matter how long it is. What matters is just you having the honesty to see how long can you cultivate some helpful quality. And whoever you are, and however much material you've got, and however long you've been practicing, at some point, you can't do that anymore. At some point, it might be too much. Like if you've been sitting with your legs folded on top of each other for ages and ages, and long ago your legs have gone to sleep, at some point, it's not helpful anymore. You're not cultivating anything anymore. All you're doing is like, oh no, I will sit there, come what may. So at some point you notice you've switched from being able to cultivate ease, gentleness, spaciousness, etc., to just sort of becoming bloody-minded with it. Or that actually your fear of more pain, or your busyness of mind about why it's like that and what you should do about it, or something unhelpful is starting to take over. When something unhelpful is starting to take over, stop or switch. Like if it's physically uncomfortable, when something unhelpful has started, just move your posture, open your legs, stand up, wiggle your bum, like do something to reset and reconnect with a sense of ease. If it's something emotional that you're tracking, anger, sadness, hurt, resentment, jealousy, etc., right? And at some point you notice, I've been able to just be gentle with that. And then I get a bit reactive. And then I come back to the gentleness. So the cultivation of something helpful isn't constant, right? It keeps being interrupted by my old patterns, but I'm able to keep coming back, cultivating. And then at some point, I'm not anymore. At some point, I'm just tired, or I'm just fed up, or I can feel that it's just the vortex of that emotional thing is starting to get too much of a grip on me. Okay, open your eyes, look around. There's more to this universe than just your emotional life, right? Connect, redirect your attention to something that's soothing, something that's beautiful. Maybe you'll put on some music. Maybe you'll walk, go to the park. Maybe you'll still track the fact that there's this hurt or sadness or whatever it is, but you're tracking in the context of there's a whole other bigger universe that isn't just your pain, right? So I think that's the most helpful way to track the how long to stay. Stay as long as you can recognize that you're doing something useful, and then give yourself permission to switch gears when that's no longer the case.
Thanks. And one there, I know, for example, like Robert Bayer has some great recorded stuff on finding the pleasure in things as well, and I'm sure there's plenty of resources that can be found there.
Not enough pleasure doesn't get mentioned enough in meditation practice. It's so crucial. You won't sustain or develop or deepen a practice or keep the passion for it very long, right? If you don't give yourself the resources to enjoy your practice. A friend of mine was on a long retreat in Burma and went to see the teacher, and Burmese monastery, like boot camp style. and they was the food didn't agree with them, and the 3 o'clock in the morning wake up bell didn't agree with them, and the heat didn't agree with them, and the mosquitoes didn't agree with them. And all the catalogue, you can always find there's always something to moan about, right? There's always things that and so they would take their various complaints to the teacher, and the teacher would say, okay, well this, and okay, well that, and we move the room, and we recognise that you're used to a different diet, so we'll try to do something, etc. And the complaints continued, and at some point the teacher said, okay, enough. He said, you're supposed to be enjoying your practice. Go back to your hut and enjoy your practice. And my friend was furious because they felt misunderstood, not listened to, etc. But then they reflected a little bit on what that encouragement was. It wasn't the teacher being insensitive and just sending them off. It was actually a really helpful instruction. And so they sort of just started again. Okay, put aside all the things that are uncomfortable or inconvenient, right? Okay, and just what does it mean to enjoy my practice? I've come halfway around the world to be here. I've put time aside to be here. I'm led by this vision of a liberated life. And that moment was really transformational in my friends. It just reminded them to ground themselves in the resources of gratitude. I mean, look, you've got a consciousness and a body and a mind. Like, hello, you're in good enough. If you're in good enough shape to be able to cultivate something helpful, that's a blessing. So yeah, very important.
Yeah, and we have a learning track on this event on re-establishing practice, but that can just be a great way is noticing that part as well. So do check out those sessions, but that's also just a nice way is just actually doing that. And as you mentioned as well, there can be stuff like the metta style practices as well, which are used along with the wisdom stuff. But segue slightly into another one. Uncomfortable experiences or challenging experiences can sometimes also be around pleasurable stuff or addictive stuff. Do you approach that sometimes in a similar way to what you would approach anger, like a real desire that's unbalanced and without choice? Can that be approached in a similar way?
Yeah, it's difficult to say too much about that because it depends. When we talk about addictive stuff, there's a whole spectrum, right? There's addictive stuff when I find, I've got a less than perfect relationship with cake, for example, and sometimes I might call that an addictive relationship. I have a piece of cake and then I just go back to the tin and have another piece of cake. So okay, you can hang out with your desire for cake, and might give yourself, okay, there's nothing wrong with eating cake, but let me just hang out and actually feel the desire, feel like, what am I trying to do, right? There's room to kind of investigate that. And then there's the spectrum of addiction can go a lot further than that to behaviors that are really harmful to oneself, harmful to those around, that wrecking one's health and one's relationships and one's life, etc. And definitely a meditative exploration of those things can be helpful, but it may well not be enough on its own. So I don't want to sometimes I think you see in the various spiritual traditions meditation as this sort of great panacea, as if you can meditate everything away. And hey, in my life, meditation has been the single most radical liberating force. But there's plenty of other good modalities as well. And there are various things that may be more specifically addiction focused, trauma focused, etc., that may be either more helpful than meditation or helpful in parallel with the meditation practice. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think time maybe just for one more little question. So I'll make it a two-part one. You mentioned relaxation obviously being very helpful. That can mean different things to different people. So are you able to maybe define what you mean by that and look at how that differs maybe from sometimes what can come up as a nonchalance, or maybe people going into what's traditionally called sloth and torpor, quietness, things like that? How can you balance that relaxation with maybe that energy, or where the midpoint is?
Yeah. So when I talk about meditation, about relaxation in a meditative sense, it's a relaxation that makes you more awake. Right? It's a relaxation into being more conscious. So I mentioned in the talk that our usual associations with relaxation are ways of going unconscious, right? With spacing out in various ways. So it's unfamiliar to us to relax in a way that we become more conscious. But those two things actually go together, right? We can just notice our tensions. Oh, and so there's the awake to relax. Relaxing tension actually allows you to be more awake and present to what's happening. More awake and present allows you to notice subtler tensions. Noticing subtler tensions allows you to relax more, etc., etc. And so at first that may not be happening, because don't underestimate how strong our associations are with spacing out. So we say, oh, I'm just going to, okay, Martin says, just relax when you meditate. So I relax, relax. And then, you're not being spacious, you're just spacing out, right? So if you're just spacing out, then it's helpful to be pretty clear, like, for example, on the object of meditation that you're using. So it might be the breath. Oh, just relax and breathe. That's easy. Relax and breathe. But if you just have the sense of relaxing and breathing, you may very well go dull or space out, or just you're checking in every now and then. Oh yeah, I'm still breathing, and then off into some kind of idle reverie, and then oh yeah, here's an in-breath. So sometimes I talk about an attention with the breathing that's complete and continuous. It doesn't mean that your attention will be complete and continuous, but it's a way of kind of like turning up the volume a little in your practice. So you can really relax into your breath, but relax into giving a complete attention. Complete means not just a little bit while the rest of it roams around in the realms of the vague, right? Just to complete attention means letting all my attention pour into the feel of the breath. And then continuous through the out breath into that space at the end. Stay into the in breath. So the completeness and the continuousness of your attention will keep getting interrupted, right, by just the stuff that takes us away in meditation. But having that intention, having that, you keep checking in, let my attention be continuous and complete. That's a way to, on the one hand, be relaxed, because it's not like, okay, complete and continuous. Then you're trying too hard. There's no relaxation. So relaxing, but with that intention to be bright, to be right here.
Yeah, thank you. And I believe on the course as well, there's a graphic that we share about this complete, continuous, and two other quadrants. I have the graphic somewhere, but I won't be able to pull it up now. You're like, there is? Okay.
I'm sure there is. It's probably not my. I'm not such a one for coming up with clever graphics, but others are very much. And so I've seen some pretty cool representations of some of this stuff. And for some people, it's really great having a visual representation. And I remember we had some of those the first time we ran the training. So yes, I'm sure they'll be there.
All right. Well, thank you, Martin. Essentially getting to time. So just as a final thing, is there one takeaway point you would like to share from this? And I'll just re-emphasize again, you can check out Martin either on the course or obviously Sangha Live, martinelwood.com. Head along to the retreat center there, which maybe I'll do sometime this year, at least soonish. And yeah, thanks very much for this. So any final message to close?
I guess the final. So let's go back to the first point: embodied presence. Wonderful. Cultivate it. Meditate, but don't wait for meditation. So just right now, here you are. And as you're listening to this, and maybe you go on to another session in the conference, just to see if you can be listening with that sort of full spectrum presence, embodied presence. You're listening with your belly, listening with your arms. You're listening sort of through a consciousness that's filled out into the whole sense of being here, rather than squeezed up into this little space here.
Great, thank you. And of course, you can share this replay with friends and that sort of thing. The replay to be sent out. So we share this around, and see you around next time. So thanks, Martin.
Thanks, Steve.